No wonder Slidell was elated, so much so that he seemed to have given little heed to the Emperor's sinister idea that the whole affair must be subterranean. But the wily Bonaparte had not forgotten that 6 months earlier he had issued a decree of neutrality forbidding Frenchmen to take commissions from either belligerent for the armament of vessels of war, or to accept letters of marque, or to cooperate in any way whatsoever in the equipment or arming of any vessel of war or corsair of either belligerent. He did not intend to abandon publicly this cautious attitude, at least not for the present. And while Slidell at Paris was completely taken in, the cooler head of A. Dudley Mann, Confederate Commissioner at Brussels, saw what an international quicksand was the flavor of Napoleon. It was about this time that Napoleon, having dispatched General Faure with a fresh army to Mexico, wrote the famous letter which gave notice to the world of what he was about. Mann wrote home in alarm that the Emperor might be expected to attempt recovering Mexico's ancient areas, including Texas. Slidell saw in the Faure letter only views which will not be gratifying to the Washington government. The adroit Armand, acting on hints from high officers of the government, applied for permission to build and arm ships of war, alleging that he intended to send them to the Pacific and sell them to either China or Japan. To such a laudable expression of commercial enterprise, one of his fellows in the imperial ring, equipped with proper authority under Bonaparte, hastened to give official appropriation, and Erlanger came forward by way of financial backer. There were conferences of Confederate agents. Contracts were signed, plans were agreed upon, and the work was begun. There was no more hopeful man in the Confederate service than Slidell, when in the flush of pride after Chancellorsville, he appealed to the Emperor to cease waiting on other powers and recognize the Confederacy. Napoleon accorded another gracious interview, but still insisted that it was impossible for him to act alone. He said that he was more fully convinced than ever of the propriety of a general recognition by the European powers of the Confederate States, but that the commerce of France and the interest of the Mexican expedition would be jeopardized by a rupture with the United States, and unless England would stand by him, he dared not risk such an eventuality. In point of fact, he was like a speculator who is hedging on the stock exchange, both buying and selling, and trying to make up his mind on which casts to stake his fortune. At the same time, he threw out once more the sinister caution about the ships. He said that the ships might be built in France, but that their destination must be concealed. That Napoleon's choice just then, if England had supported him, would have been recognition of the Confederacy, cannot be doubted. The tangle of intrigue which he called his foreign policy was not encouraging. He was deeply involved in Italian politics, where the daring of Garibaldi had reopened the struggle between clerics and liberals. In France itself, the struggle between parties was keen. Here, as in the American area, he found it hard to decide with which party to break. The commercial scheme of a Latin empire in Mexico was his spectacular device to catch the imagination and incidentally the pocketbook of everybody. But in order to carry out this enterprise, he must be able to avert or withstand the certain hostility of the United States. Therefore, as he told Slidell, no other power than England possesses a sufficient navy to pull his chestnuts out of the fire. The moment was auspicious, for there was a revival of the Southern party in England. The sailing of the Alabama from Liverpool during the previous summer had encouraged the Confederate agents and their British friends to undertake further shipbuilding. While M. Armand was at work in France, the Laird brothers were at work in England, and their dockyards contained 2 ironclad rams supposed to outclass any vessel of the United States Navy. Though every effort had been made to keep secret the ultimate destination of these rams, the vigilance of the United States ministers, reinforced by the zeal of the Northern party, detected strong circumstantial evidence pointing toward a Confederate contract with the Lairds. A popular agitation ensued along with demands upon the government to investigate. To mask the purpose of the Lairds, Captain James Bullock, the able special agent of the Confederate Navy, was forced to fall back upon the same tactics that were being used across the Channel, and to sell the rams on paper to a firm in France. Neither he nor Slidell yet appreciated what a doubtful refuge was the shadow of Napoleon's wing. Nevertheless, the British government by this time, particularly aligned with the North, continued its search for the real owner of the Laird rams. The Southern party, however, had not quite given up hope, and the agitation to prevent the sailing of the rams was a keen spur to its flagging zeal. Furthermore, the prestige of Lee never was higher than it was in June 1863, when the news of Chancellorsville was still fresh and resounding in every mind. It had given new life to the Confederate hope. Lee would take Washington before the end of the summer. The Laird rams would go to sea. The Union would be driven to the wall. So reasoned the ardent friends of the South. But one thing was lacking: a European alliance. What a time for England to intervene! While Slidell was talking with the Emperor, he had in his pocket a letter from J.A. Roebuck, an English politician who wished to force the issue in the House of Commons. As a preliminary to moving the recognition of the Confederacy, he wanted authority to deny a rumor going the rounds in London to the effect that Napoleon had taken position against intervention. Napoleon, when he had seen the letter, began a negotiation of some sort with this politician. It is needless to enter into the complications that ensued, the subsequent recriminations, and the question as to just what Napoleon promised at this time and how many of his promises he broke. He was a diplomat of the old school, the school of lying as a fine art. He permitted Roebuck to come over to Paris for an audience, and Roebuck went away with the impression that Napoleon could be relied upon to back up a new movement for recognition. When, however, Roebuck brought the matter before the Commons at the end of the month and encountered an opposition from the government that seemed to imply an understanding with Napoleon which was different from his own, he withdrew his motion in July. Once more the scale turned against the Confederacy, and Gettysburg was supplemented by the seizure of the Laird rams by the British authorities. These events explain the bitter turn given to Confederate feeling toward England in the latter part of 1863. On the 4th of August, Benjamin wrote to Mason that the perusal of the recent debates in Parliament satisfies the President that Mason's continued residence in London is neither conducive to the interests nor consistent with the dignity of this government, and directed him to withdraw to Paris. Confederate feeling, as it cooled toward England, warmed toward France. Napoleon's Mexican scheme included the offer of a ready-made imperial crown to Maximilian, the brother of the Emperor of Austria, was fully understood at Richmond, and with Napoleon's need of an American ally, Southern hope revived. It was further strengthened by a pamphlet which was translated and distributed in the South as a newspaper article under the title France, Mexico, and the Confederate States. The reputed author, Michael Cavalier, was an imperial senator, another member of the Napoleon Ring, and highly trusted by his shifty master. The pamphlet, which emphasized the importance of Southern independence as a condition of Napoleon's beneficent arms in Mexico, was held to have been inspired, and the imperial denial was regarded as a mere matter of form. What appeared to be significant of the temper of the imperial government was a decree of a French court in the case of certain merchants who sought to recover insurance on wine dispatched to America and destroyed in a ship taken by the Alabama. Their plea was that they were insured against loss by pirates. The court dismissed their suit and assessed costs against them. Further evidence of Napoleon's favor was the permission given to the Confederate cruiser Florida to repair at Brest and even to make use of the imperial dockyard. The very general faith in Napoleon's promise was expressed by Davis in his message to Congress in December. Although preferring our own government and institution to those of other countries, we can have no disposition to contest the exercise by them of the same right of self-government which we assert for ourselves. If the Mexican people prefer a monarchy to a republic, it is our plain duty cheerfully to acquiesce in their decision and to evince a sincere and friendly interest in their prosperity. The Emperor of the French has solemnly disclaimed any purpose to impose on Mexico a form of government not acceptable to the nation. In January 1864, hope of recognition through support of Napoleon's Mexican policy moved the Confederate Congress to adopt resolutions providing for a minister of the Mexican Empire and giving him instructions with regard to a preemptive treaty. To the new post, Davis appointed General William Preston.